I have been asked by Abed to talk about the water situation and the violation of environment by Israelis and by Palestinians sometimes. I'm pleased to do so. Actually, in Palestine, water is not oxygen and hydrogen. It's political, social, environmental, and economical. It's political in Palestine in specific and in the entire Middle East because water, since 1967 till now, water resources managed, controlled, and distributed by Israeli military orders. And this is the only place in the world water department is belong to the Ministry of Defense, not to the Ministry of Agriculture or not. As you know, water also, it's one of the final status issues will be negotiated by Palestinians and Israelis. Oslo agreement only just put a transition and a temporary arrangement. We will talk about Oslo later. The main sources of water resources in West Bank is the groundwater and surface water. And the groundwater is wells and springs, and the surface water, the only surface water, permanent surface water we have is the Jordan River. And the Jordan River, if it is in Latin America or in Europe, nobody will care about it because it's not a river. It's a small valley. But like the single woman in the party, everyone wants to dance with it. And the Jordan River is the only surface water. Everyone wants to dance with it. The Syrians, Jordanians, Palestinians, Lebanon, and Israel. And we will see how everybody dances with it. This is the main aquifers or the main groundwater in West Bank. This is what we call it Eastern Aquifer, Northeast Aquifer, and Western Aquifer, and this is so-called the green line. I'm not sure if it is green, but this is actually the political border between West Bank and Israel. The Eastern Basin, potential water in Eastern Basin is 70 to 80 million cubic meter, and the Western Basin is 350 to 380, and the Northwestern is 80 to 100 million cubic meter. In general, the renewable water, groundwater, is around 650 million cubic meter. And as you see, the only things move free in West Bank and Israel, two things moving free: groundwater and wastewater, and the car thieves. They are also move free from Israel to West Bank and from West Bank to Israel. But also groundwater is moving from West Bank to Israel and from Israel to Gaza, and the wastewater. And this is the general summary. This is recharge in West Bank, which is 624 million cubic meter, and from outside 72 million cubic meter, which is actually from outside of the West Bank, outside of the Palestine, because this is part of it goes to Gaza. And how it's used, this water which is in West Bank, I'm not talking about water in Israel, I'm talking about water in West Bank. How it is used, the Palestinians, they use 18%, and the Israelis, they use 82%. Of course, each aquifer is, and why these things? Because the Israelis, they prohibited Palestinians to drill wells, and the Israelis, as we will see later in the map, they drilled wells inside Israel, but milking our mountains. Because they prohibited us to drill wells, and they drilled wells, and they milking the mountains, because the water naturally goes to them. And this is the wells of Israelis and the Palestinians. As you see, the total abstraction from Palestinian wells is around 65 million cubic meter, and the rest of wells abstracted by Israelis is 56 million cubic meter, but this is inside West Bank. The most of water taken from the wells outside of West Bank, but the source of water from West Bank. And you see the distribution of Israeli wells and Palestinian wells, and this is West Bank, but this is a Swiss cheese, okay? And you see there is also a lot of small valleys, but this valleys or this is small wadis is seasonal, not permanent. The only one is the Jordan Valley as service water, and this is the consumption and demand of the Palestinians for agriculture and domestic and industrial. And if we want to see the deficit, nowadays in 2010, the Palestinians, they have deficit of 4 million cubic meter. That's meaning there is a lot of Palestinian villages without water. Agriculture area is diminishing, is shrinking because the lack of water, and this amount every year increasing because the population growth.
We're talking about, million of cubic meters.
Yes.
This 4
million cubic meter. Yes, the gap or the deficit. And as you see, this is the wall, but I have a presentation separately to the wall, but the wall, in my opinion, as hydrologist, not as Palestinian, the only reason behind the wall is water. And why? I have 3 evidence for that. I published an article about the wall in international journal, International Environmental Journal. The wall in 1991, I don't want to go in history, but in 1930, when the first Zionist group came to Palestine, they said the future of Zionism, in that time was no Israel, the future of Zionism is the food of hills, the edges of hills. But in 1991, the Minister of Agriculture in Israel was Rafael Eitan, and he put advertisement in the newspaper why the Israelis should not give up the mountains of the West Bank. And he said, because the water, and he said we have to shift the green line 6 to 8 kilometers to the east, which means taking up some land from Palestine. In 1995, the Minister of Defense in Israel, Mordechai, he suggested a map to separate West Bank from Israel, and he said we have to shift the green line 8 to 10 kilometers to the east. And if you see that map, the Ishaq Mordechai map, and the wall map is the same. And why? Why? Because Israeli wells, as you see here, okay, they are in discharge area. They're in the area where they can extract water, and by shifting the well, shifting the wall to the east, 99% of the discharge area where you can have water will be under Israeli control. This is one thing. The second thing.
I didn't understand the last sentence. How much?
If behind the wall, 99% of the aquifers will be in Israeli control, inside Israel. But this is not only this reason. The second reason, the only agricultural area in West Bank, Jordan Valley, and this area, the north. And if you have no water, within 10 years you have no agriculture. And when you start negotiations in the future with Israelis in the final status about water, one of the rules of the international rule, you have to justify your need. And if you say, I need, if I'm Israeli and you are Palestinian and you ask me to have water more, I will ask you why you need water. You will say for agriculture. I will say you have no agriculture anymore. Then the Israelis, like what they do in Jerusalem and Jordan Valley, they want to create facts, and in the future nothing to negotiate about it. And this is their strategy in general. They create facts, expansion of the settlements, doing walls, doing closure in Jerusalem, everything. And in water they do the same. But of course the normal citizen, they cannot realize what is the future. But this is the strategy of Israelis who have no irrigated land in Palestine, in Jordan Valley and in the north. And this is will keep all Palestinian workers cheap labor in Israeli market, in Israeli kibbutzim, because they are farmers. They know how to do agriculture. Then the Israelis, they will have market because we will have no agriculture. They will have market to their products and market for cheap labor from Palestinians, because our agriculture used to be during Jordanian time. 27% of agriculture was under irrigation during Jordanian time. Now it's just 3% because the lack of water. And there is many proposal now is done by international communities to do desalination of seawater or desalination of brackish water, or to do some actions, but nobody talk about redistribution the water. This is the new Kerry plan. And I want to show you something about the wall.
Sorry, can you see that the new Kerry plan entails what you just said?
Yeah, in the Kerry plan there will be improving the supply, the infrastructure, but nothing about the resources. That's why I will come to that later. What is the new plans? And as you know, as part of the Israeli strategy to change the land, and this is the area where is uprooted trees to let the wall pass. And this trees is olive trees, some of them 400 years old or 500 years old. For Palestinians, this uprooting history, not uprooting trees, because in our culture, olive trees like sons, like daughters, and this is part of the strategy. But this is, I just want to show you, this is the reservoir done by our organization and International Church Council, and this is it's become behind the wall. Now it's in Israeli side, and this is absolute. But what is related to the subject, just I want to show you one picture to prove what I'm saying about this picture taken. Sorry. This picture taken in October 2002, and this picture taken in December 2002. And this is environmental terrorism. Terrorism, no other definition. You uproot all these trees, and this is in Falamia village, and now this is in 2002. Now thousands of dunums. I hope you have time to go and to see thousands of dunum of hectares becomes desertified. Khalas, no more agriculture. And just to show you one thing. This is the plan of Israelis to have separate. This is Palestinian territories, to have separate entities, separate geographical areas, full with checkpoints and security points, can be controlled any minute. And after that, This is so-called Palestine. After that, you can call it Emperor of Palestine, United States of Palestine. They don't care about the name. They care about the content, and this is Swiss cheese, not Palestine. And just to show you, this is Israeli settlements, the dots, triangles. And this is how the wall constructed. This is the north part, and this is the middle part, and this is the and after that, the final status, Palestine will be 3 blocks, separated blocks, controlled totally by Israelis. This will be the Palestinian enclaves. But I want to show you one thing about the agriculture. This area, it's also in Jayus and Falamia villages. This greenhouses used to be in Palestinian side, and after the war, all these things disappeared. There is no any agriculture behind the wall now. And you see now they change the roads of because the wall, and they did alternative walls for Palestinians, roads, I mean. Now, what's going on? The Israeli Authority, with some international powers like World Bank and like USAID, because the World Bank and USAID is the biggest donor to the water sector in Palestine. They want to do 3 authorities, 3 companies, one in the north, one in the south, and one in the middle, and one in Gaza, or 3 in West Bank and 1. And nowadays in Israel, there is a 12 in Israel, 12 desalination plants from the sea under construction, 3 of them totally completed, and the Palestinians will be the consumers. That's meaning we will be consumer, not citizen, in Israeli water sector. This desalination, and this is part of Kiri plan, is to sell the water to the Palestinians at commercial basis. If you have money and you can pay, buy water. You don't have. While the Israelis will have a privilege to use all groundwater in West Bank. And they will give us desalinated water at commercial basis, and some Palestinian businessmen also is part of the system. They will have the companies, and they will purchase water from Israel and selling to the Palestinians as business, not as rights or sovereignty or national rights. Nothing to do. That's why the Israelis, they look to us here as a consumer more than as a citizen in our country in terms of water. The other thing also, they want to do from Red Sea to the Dead Sea a canal or pipes, I don't know, and they want to use the differences in elevation, because the Dead Sea is minus 400, and from Red Sea they will pump water to 120, and they want to use the 520 differences in elevation to produce energy by waterfalls, and the energy will be used to desalinate water. And the brine water, very salty water, will go to the Dead Sea, and the desalinated water will go to the West Bank and Amman, because the needs. But from economical point of view, not from political point of view, because I disagree with the project, but from economical point of view, to desalinate water at minus 400 and to bump it to Hebron city, whereas 1,200, that's meaning you are pumping water 1,600 meters. For Palestinians to drink whiskey more cheap. That's why the Kiri plan is to solve Palestinian daily problems by pure market rules, not by sovereignty. But we are not talking about water in Israel. We talk about the water in West Bank should be controlled by Palestinians and should be used for agriculture, because in Israel, as engineer, I'm looking to this. In Israel nowadays, the Israelis they use around 70% of water resources for agriculture, while the agricultural contribution in Israeli GNP not more than 3%. And the Israelis nowadays, they are producing softwares and IT more than the agricultural sector. The revenue of softwares is more than agricultural sector. But they have some other problems. They have ideology to make the desert green. Some Israelis, I have no problem to make the desert green. But the Palestinians should not pay the invoice, because we pay that from our water. The Israelis, they diverted the Jordan River from the north to the Negev desert to irrigate palm trees, while the Palestinian villages are thirsty. That's one problem. The second problem also, Palestine is agricultural community. We have no industry, no tourism, no, as Israelis. We are single sector country, which is agriculture. And the agricultural land every time shrinking by settlements, by lack of water, by confiscation. That's meaning our food security is a threat. And our agriculture, we are not like Europe or Latin America. We don't have farmer class. We don't have farmers. We have family-based agriculture. Then you are threat the whole livelihood of the families by confiscated land and water. The whole family collapse because there is no income. Because, as I said, we don't have large farmers who are doing a lot of business. What we do is family-based agriculture. One greenhouse, two greenhouse, and this is the main income for the families. That's why you increase the unemployment and you decrease the income when you confiscate their land or water. Now, what is Oslo said in water? You know Oslo, how it's written? Oslo is O-S-L-O. Capital O-S-L-O. They promised us with a big zero at the beginning and a small zero at the end. This is Oslo, O-S-L-O. And we are playing between two zeros. This game called negotiations. Because what the Israelis offer us is a big zero at Oslo, what now compromise with us a small zero. But what the game is between two zeros. I'll give you an example. For example, nowadays the Israelis, they say, okay, let us negotiate about sea area, or area C, which is 62% of West Bank. And it is the agricultural area. It's the area where we can potential for expansion the cities and the villages. It's the area where we can do our industry in the future. It's the area where we can all economic activities, because you cannot do national park at the middle of Ramallah. What the Israelis offer us to control B area and A area, which is 40% of West Bank, and to have the whole Jordan Valley, which is the food basket of Palestinians, as security zone. Then what we negotiate is a small zero. I am pro-existence with Israelis. I'm pro-peace process. I'm not against peace process. But what's going on now is psychotherapy, not peace process. And some Palestinians and some Israelis, they enjoying the process, not the output of the process. And we have a neighbor in our village, he has 14 kids. And I asked him to stop because he cannot afford them. He said, I'm enjoying the process, not the children. And I think the Palestinians and Israelis, they enjoying the peace process, not the peace, not the peace, not the peace. And what's going on? Israelis, they using the time to have more land, more confiscation and expansion of the settlements. That's why they are enjoying the process. And in my opinion, two things will happen in the future. You remember me, I'm in this business since 25 years. The Palestinians will not throw flowers to Israelis in the near future. Not because just political rights or just because the young people in Palestine, they are, let me say, they don't care a lot about homeland and what's Palestine. Because their dignity is threatened. If you go to the checkpoints, if you go to the schools, if you go to the people, they feel their dignity is threatened. That's why the violence, the coming violence, or the expected violence will be really very huge against Palestinian Authority and against Israelis. Because in Gaza nowadays, the people, they are drinking water unfit for agriculture. I was in a mission with WHO 2 years ago to Gaza, and the guy from World Health Organization told me simply, they are drinking their shits. The nitrate is 15 times more than the permitted limit in WHO standards. 15 times, which means they're drinking sewage. And that water is not fit for agriculture. How can fit to the human beings? And if you go to Gaza, don't ask anybody you are from West Bank or Gaza, just look to his teeth. Yellow, destroyed because the high fluoride. And nowadays Gaza, it's the biggest place in the world they are using bottled water because they don't trust the groundwater. And imagine you are purchasing very expensive water in the area, the 60% under poverty and 37% unemployed, which means they purchase water in expense of education and health. They save water from other things to purchase water because they cannot live without water, but they can live without schools or education or good health. That's why, in my opinion, the situation is very bad. And look what the Israelis did to the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is, the Israelis, they start to re-kill it. It's dead, but they re-kill it because the only fresh water used to come to the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is the uniqueness place in the world in terms of composition of the souls. It's the holy place because the baptist of the Jesus. And it's historic place. Archaeology, everything is there. And this is within, all the experts, they say, within 15 years, there will be no Dead Sea. And nobody open mouth about it. No, UNESCO, the international community, and even at political level, especially Europe, is very, very something unbelievable. It's double face, simply double face. They encourage Palestinians to do democracy. They paid $500 million to do democracy in Palestine, elections and election law, and when we passed the exam, we have been punished. I'm not happy with the results of election, with Hamas took over the power. I'm not happy, but this is the game. You have to respect the results. And this is Hamas religion party, is 20%, 30%, whatever. But this is the democracy. We passed the exam and Europe punished us. This is double face. This is double face. They say we are against settlements, But if you look to the trade between settlements and Europe, between Israel and Europe is increased. If you look the scientific cooperation between Israel from settlements and Israel and Europe is increasing, then what we take is lip services. That's what I wanted to say.